So we're going to pick up our story. Again, sorry for those of you who are just joining us right now. We're just going to pick up from where we left off last week, okay? In verse 16. But I'll do some review just so everybody is on the same page. All right? So verse 16 is where Moses, after having committed murder, okay? If you remember the verses prior, Moses, in defense of one of his brothers, one of the Israelites, killed an Egyptian, buried him in the sand, and because he was in trouble with Pharaoh, the next day when he came back and most of the slaves knew what happened, he had to go run. He ran away because Pharaoh was going to kill him. This is where we're at in verse 16. After Moses fled Egypt and fled the wrath of Pharaoh that was coming down on him, he came to the land of Midian, where the author of Exodus clearly states he sat down by a well. Now, any writer, if you're an avid reader, if you see something like that, there's got to be some kind of significance. Why would the author write that down, that he sat down by the well? Because something was going to happen at the well, okay? Now, if you read the story, okay, the story talks about him sitting down by the well. While he was sitting down by the well, some girls came. Okay? 7 girls came, daughters of, it says here Ruel, but what's the other name for the father of Moses' wife? Jethro, right? I know some of us. I was reading Ruel, Jethro. If you read commentaries, you'll see that sometimes Jethro is called Ruel and Ruel Jethro. Just like Jacob was sometimes called Jacob and sometimes Isaac. Okay, so or Israel, sorry, Isaac, Israel. His daughters came down by the well. Okay, Jethro's daughters came down by the well to get some water. And some shepherds there, and the shepherds drove them away. And Moses played the hero and pretty much helped the girls out. Okay, that's where our story is. It's pretty much self-explanatory. There's not much to, what's the Greek or the Hebrew word for this? No, it's pretty much self-explanatory. So what we're going to do today, as far as interpreting this part of the chapter is concerned, is to ask some questions, obvious questions regarding this story. And from there, my goal this morning is to show us through this part of the story how God grows his people to the people he has called them to be. Okay, that's why the title of the message is Spiritual Growth Strategies. Can we flash that? Because we don't have any programs. It's called Spiritual Growth Strategies. Why? Because I said last week, what was the purpose for Moses' killing of the Egyptian? There was God, obviously, if he allowed it to happen, there has to be a purpose. And the purpose was so that he could spend time in Midian. How long did he spend in Midian, in the desert, with these people? 40 years, right? What's the purpose for that? So that he could grow into the leader, the rescuer that God has called him to be. Because that's what's going to happen next. You guys know that, right? From Sunday school. Otherwise, Sunday school teachers, what are you teaching? Okay, right? That's why this 40-year stint in Midian was so important. This is where God was going to grow Moses into the leader that he was going to be, or that God has called him to be. So my goal, this morning is to show you from this part of the story some of the strategies or some of the ways that God uses, not just in the life of Moses that we can see here, but in our lives, in order to help us grow spiritually and therefore accomplish his purpose for our lives here on earth. Okay? That's the goal. And hopefully I'll get through it this morning. And the way we're going to go through it is to ask questions about the story. Okay? Now, first question I asked myself about the story was, who were the Midianites? Okay. Moses was in Midian. He ran into some Midianites. Who were these people? Okay. And again, this is a pretty obvious question to ask because where Moses end up in. So to answer this question, let's go back to Genesis 25. Genesis 25, 1 to 3. Let's read it. Actually, you guys read it in the audience. 25:1. 25:2. 3. Okay, if you go back to verse 2, okay, it says here that Abraham's wife after Sarah, or, okay, bore him who? Zimran, Jokshan, Medan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. So Midian is a son of Abraham. After Sarah died, Abraham took another wife. That wife bore him Midian. And therefore, the Midianites were descendants from Midian and therefore considered as children of Abraham. Okay? Those were the Midianites. And according to Genesis, the Midianites settled in the land of the east, but they had nomadic tendencies later in their history. That nomadic means they moved from place to place, like gypsies nowadays. if you look, if you know the gypsies, right? So that's why they ended up where they ended up in the desert, and that's how Moses ran into them. So they're sons or they're descendants of Abraham. Now, according to a book entitled Exodus Route Restored by Stephen Rudd, Midian, where Moses ended up in, was about 300 to 350 miles from Egypt. Okay? In kilometers, that's what? 800 kilometers. Right? Is that right? Times 2 point, I think it's 2.2 is the conversion, right? From miles to kilometers, right? So it's about 700 something kilometers from Egypt. Or 1.6? I think it's not 2.2. So okay, 1.6. I'm wrong. That's pounds to kilograms. Okay, that's why I'm a pastor. But that's how many? So 1.6 times 350. 500 kilometers. And there was no Uber back then. There was no subways. There was no go bus. He had to walk. And he didn't walk, apparently. He ran. Because he was running away from Pharaoh. So about that far, he ran or walked about 350 miles. There's a map right there. I don't know if you can see the route that Moses took from the south of Egypt all the way to Midian. But that's the route. He crossed the desert, okay, to get to Midian. So the book says, the book that's called Exodus Route Restored, says that if Moses walked 20 miles a day, it would have taken him about 18 days to get to Midian. Okay, 2 weeks, about 2 weeks to get to Midian. So after he did the murder, so imagine this in your head, picture this. After he committed the murder, buried the guy in the sand, came back the next day, talked to the two Israelites who were fighting, and they said, "Hey, what are you gonna? You're gonna kill us like you did the Egyptian?" He's like, "Oh no, everybody knows. Let me get out of here." 2 weeks of walking and running to get to Midian. Suffice it to say that Moses had some time to think about what he did on this walk. What else are you going to do but think about what you did, right? It's like when Forrest Gump, have you seen Forrest Gump, the movie? One of my favorite movies. When his wife died, what did he do? Took his Nikes that his wife gave him and started running. Forrest Gump ran across the United States and back and back and back and back. What was he doing the whole time? Thinking about his wife. Remember Jenny? Jenny, his wife, right? And that's all he did. Thought about his wife, going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And that's what Moses did. He ran. Thought about what he did. Thought about the murder that he just committed. And I totally get it. I do the same thing, right? I do the same thing. Not exactly the same. I drive now. There's cars. I'm not going to walk 18 days. I drive. One time I drove to Niagara Falls from Milton. Why? Because I had an argument with my wife. And I just wanted to think about things, to get a new perspective on things, to think about what I did, what I could have done different, what I should have done. And you can't do that with your wife standing in front of you arguing with you. So you leave the home, you go to your car, and you drive. And from Milton, I drove all the way to your neck of the woods, past St. Catharines to Niagara Falls. When I got to Niagara Falls, my wife called me, and she's like, "Where are you?" "I'm in Niagara Falls. Where do you think I am?" And she got even more angry. "Why did you bring me with you?" So, but that's what happened. That's what happened to Moses. Okay, after he committed murder, he ran so that he could think. He had 18 days to think about what he did. So he didn't only run to get away from Pharaoh, but I think that journey that he took for 18 days to get to Midian gave him some time to think, gave him some time to reflect on what he did. And I think that if you read the rest of the story, that 18 days did Moses some good, right? Check out verse 16 and 17 of chapter 2. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water and filled the troughs with water to water the father's flock. The shepherds came and drove them away, but Moses stood up and saved them and watered their flock. Right? So what happened? After Moses ran, stopped by a well, sat down by the well, and then again, what happened? Another injustice happened. Okay. Moses was just witness to a justice 2 weeks before. What was the injustice? Egyptian beating up a Hebrew. Now, after he ran, he's witnessing another injustice. Not as bad as the one before, but it's still an injustice. There were some shepherds who drove away the daughters of the priest of Midian. I would say they were being bullied, right? Bullied from getting water from the well. So the shepherds were a little, selfish. They don't want them taking water from there. They were bullying them out so that they couldn't get any water. Another injustice. Now, the last time Moses witnessed such injustice, which was a couple of weeks back, what did he do? Killed the bully. Right? Killed the bully. But this time, when Moses acted upon injustice, which he did, he still acted upon injustice. He didn't have to sin against God like the last time. He took matters into his own hands. So what we can see here, after the 18-day road trip that Moses took, something changed. After all the 18 days, he was thinking about what he did. I killed this guy. I shouldn't have. I could have done something different. When he witnessed another form of injustice, he didn't react the same way. He still saved. He still rescued, but he didn't rescue the way he did before. He didn't let his anger get the best of him. So there was a change right away, right? There was a change right away. That's why, if you remember, I said earlier that Moses had to spend 40 years of his life in Midian, because this is God's way of disciplining him for what he did for the Egyptian. Yes, number one. But on top of that, this was also God's way of preparing him for what he's about to do for the Israelites, namely to be the rescuer. And if you can remember last week, I said Moses was called to rescue, not to avenge. Right? So Moses here, he rescued. He rescued the daughters of the Midian priest, to save them from the shepherds, but he didn't have to kill anybody. Okay? First change that we can see in Moses. So even that 18-day walk, Moses grew up. He matured as a person. Okay? So here we can see the first strategy, or the first way that God grows his people spiritually. Okay? How? Moses was, right away, he was tested. Okay? How does God grow his people spiritually? By testing. By testing. Check out Hebrews 11, 17 to 19. By faith, Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac, and he who had received the promises was in the act of offering up his only son, of whom it was said, through Isaac shall your offspring be named. He considered that God was able to even to raise him from the dead, from which, figuratively speaking, he did receive him back. So Abraham's faith, even though he was the father of faith, Abraham's faith was tested. How? When he was called to sacrifice his son, Isaac. Right? He brought him believing and trusting that God, even though he would kill his son, could bring Isaac back to life. That's how his faith grew. Through testing. Right? That's how God strengthened the faith of Abraham, by testing. How did God reveal himself to Job and therefore strengthens Job's faith in him? By testing. How was Job tested? Took everything away from him. Right? That's a hard test. But Job, through God's help, passed the test. But then after that, Job grew. Right? That was the whole purpose of the book of Job, to show that we can't just know God by ear. We have to actually know him by seeing him, by actually seeing him by faith. How did Job get that way? Through testing. Let me ask you this. Have you ever prayed for patience, and then the very next day God puts you in a situation where you would need to practice what you prayed for? I have. God, please make me patient. The next day, something comes up. Somebody tests your patience. And you're like, God, what is this happening? God's like, well, you asked for it. How else am I going to grow you if I don't test you? Right? God grows us through testing. He does that in order to strengthen and help us grow. That's what God did to Moses in verses 16 and 17. Because Moses needed some anger management anger management help. Whenever he witnessed injustice, okay, his anger boils up. And then he can't control it. So what did God do? God tested him. God put him in position. Okay, 18 days after killing a bully in Egypt, God once again put Moses in position to confront some bullies. But this time it was different. Last part of verse 17 says, Moses stood up and saved the women from the bullies. But no bullies died. Right? No bodies buried under the sand. And Moses, after saving the women, even what? Helped them water their flock. Right? Let's read that again. Exodus 2. Verse 17, last part of verse 17, right? So verse 17, the shepherds came and drove them away, but Moses stood up and saved them and watered their flock. So the first thing that God uses, the first way that God uses to grow his people is to test them. The second way God uses to grow his people, we can see there, is to what? Through serving. Moses served, helped, worked with these girls to water their flock. How hard is it to water flock? Back in those days, it was hard. There was no hoses. So you had to go to the well, take some water, carry that water back to the flock, fill up their troughs, have them drink. If there was 20, 30, 40 sheep or whatever their animals were, you have to do that 20, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 times. Right? Right? That's hard. I wouldn't do that. That's what impressed the servant. Remember when Jacob was looking for a wife? Right? The servant was there looking, and he saw this woman watering the flock, carrying buckets of water back and forth, back and forth. And the servant was like, that's the perfect wife for my master's son. Right? I would be impressed. If a woman can carry that much water all back and forth, yes. Moses did the same thing. He served the daughters of the priest by watering their flock. And I would say, if you look at that, that's another way that God uses to grow his people through serving or through ministry. Right? Ministry takes a lot of faith. And if we are to grow in faith, we have to have the faith to serve in a ministry. Whether your ministry is singing or teaching or preaching or giving or praying or just being an active listener during our worship services, your faith is always being watered for growth when you're in ministry. Okay? Now, I'm not saying that, oh, you should join a ministry. No, it's not about just joining a ministry. You have to have the tools for it. Right? You have to have, if you were to join the choir, you must be able to sing. Don't join the choir just because you want to join the choir. I have to be a part of ministry. I wanted to be the choir because they have good picnics and they bring lechons to their picnics and they always go to the beach and I want to join the choir. Meanwhile, you can't sing. You can't join if you can't sing. If you can't sing, right? But if you're in a ministry, this is a ministry right now. It's called a worship service, right? So as long as you're not sleeping, you're active in ministry. Let's just make it easy for people, right? That's how God grows you. And this is how God is helping you all here, those of you on Facebook. This is how God is helping you grow through ministry. Okay? And this is one thing that Moses will learn in Midian, and that is what it means to be not just a leader, but a servant leader. He has to learn how to serve first before he becomes a leader. Biblical leadership is not about power and authority alone. It is about being the lowest of servants. Who was our example for this? The Lord Jesus Christ himself. What is the book of Luke, the Gospel of Luke, chapter 22, verse 27. For who is greater, the one who reclines at the table or the one who serves? Is it not the one who reclines at the table? But look what Jesus says. But I am among you as the one who serves. And he's greater than everybody else in that room. So who's greater? The one who sits at the table or the one who serves? The one who serves. Philippians 2:7. But emptied himself by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men. That's the Lord Jesus Christ being described by the Apostle Paul to the Philippians. Emptied himself, took the form of a servant. So Jesus, the greatest of all beings, humbled himself and took the form of a servant to the point of death. That's what it means to serve. So if we were to follow in his footsteps as we continue to grow in faith, then our desire to serve must grow as well. Okay? I can't understand those Christians who, I've been Christian for 20 years. No desire to serve. Like what? Along with your faith grows your desire to serve, to be involved in the ministry. I see more Christians going the other way. I've already been a Christian 20 years. I don't need to learn anymore. I don't need to go to services. I don't need to go to Bible study. I don't need to join a cell group. I'm good. More Christians are like that. But what does this show here? Where's the growth? There's no growth, right? God uses serving, God uses ministry to grow people, to grow people's faith. That's what's happening to us, hopefully, as we continue our study of Exodus, as you continue to become an active part of this church, that you will continue to grow in faith. So two ways, right? Right away at the start of our text. God uses ministry, God uses testing in order to grow his people. Now, the next two and the last two can be seen in the next few verses, verses 18 to 22. Check out verse 18. When they came home to their father, Ruel said, or to their father Ruel, he said, "How is it that you have come home so soon today?" They said, the girls, "An Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds, and even drew water for us, and watered the flock." And he said to his daughters, "Then where is he? Why have you left the man? Call him, that he may eat bread." Moses was content to dwell with the man, and he gave Moses his daughter Zipporah. That's the easiest way to get a wife, right? Just eat some bread. Just be content. She gave birth to a son, and he called his name Gershom. For he said, "I have been a sojourner in a foreign land." What do you think is the next two growth strategies? How does God grow his people? What are the next two based on those verses? Yes. In the context, it's get married. What else? Have kids. Those are the next two ways that God grows his people. Now I know, right, there's a lot of single people here. And I know some singles probably, "Oh no. This has nothing to do with me. I'm not gonna listen." So let's see. Let's do it this way. Okay? Let's generalize it. Okay? So instead of just getting married and having kids, let's look at it this way. God grows his people through relationships, and God grows his people through family. Okay? That makes it's good for everybody, right? Good for you? Good for you. That was good? Yeah? Okay? No, still no, they're still not happy. So instead of getting married, which is the context, it's getting married and having kids. Let's make it general. Okay, God grows. God grows his people through relationships and through family. Relationships and through family. Now, here's the question. How does God use relationships and family, or marriage and children, to grow and sanctify us? How does God do it? How does God use relationships and family to grow and sanctify us? You want to learn more? You want to know? Come back next week. I have a big timer there. Okay, when I get to 30 minutes, I got to cut because the rest of this thing is going to take another 5 hours. So next week, that's our question to answer. Okay, now that we've seen how God grows through testing, through ministry, through relationships, through family. How does God use relationships and family, especially wives and husbands? How does God use your wife? How does God use your husband to grow you spiritually? Those of you, hey, Facebook land, come back next week and we'll take that up next week. Amen? Let's close with a word of prayer.
The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord lift his countenance upon